Welcome to the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. I'm thrilled you're here. My name is Jason Elkins, and in addition to being your host, I'm also a former U.S. Army paratrooper, third-generation commercial hot air balloon pilot, paramotor pilot, ex-Montana fly fishing guide, advanced open water scuba diver, and a full-time nomad that's visited more than 30 countries on 6 continents. As a seasoned adventure travel expert with a passion for creating and sharing meaningful experiences, I'm on a quest to impact the lives of adventure travelers, the tour operators they rely on, and the communities that host them. Every week, I bring you exclusive interviews with fascinating adventure tourism experts who have agreed to share their personal stories, favorite destinations, and some invaluable travel insights they've picked up along the way. We'll enjoy a casual conversation, create some connections, and likely share some laughs. It's my hope that by the end of each episode, this big world will feel just a bit smaller. Let's get started, shall we? Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Big World Made Small podcast for the adventure traveler. Big day today here on the Big World Made Small podcast. We've got Yves Marceau, Vice President of Product for G Adventures. Yves, so happy to have you here. This is quite a treat. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Thanks for inviting me. Exciting.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. Obviously, I've known about G Adventures for a long time. I think most of our listeners have at least heard the name, if not actually been on one of your trips. And we're kind of giving them a, I guess, behind the scenes or behind the curtain type of insight into you as a person primarily, but also a little bit of G and what's going on over there. And so really excited to have the conversation. Thank you. Good. Let's go back as far as you want to go into your childhood, first memories, whatever. What I think people are interested in knowing is, how did you get from where you started to where you are now? Kind of what was the journey? Because typically with people in adventure travel, they don't always take the most direct route. Sometimes they do, but sometimes they don't. So what's your story?
I am probably typical of that and not really having taken the direct route. I actually never thought I'd end up in travel. I moved to the U.S. Probably 35 years ago, after graduating college in Canada, in Montreal, and traveled around for a while and decided I was going to become a teacher. So I actually have a background in teaching, and I taught for many years at a small school in Western Massachusetts. And it was while I was teaching there that I started getting into travel. And getting into travel, like, I was teaching French, and I found that my students, really didn't connect very much with the language. And part of it is small rural community in Western Massachusetts, southern Vermont. A lot of the kids had never really left the area. And so how did I expect them to connect with taking a second language that not a lot of people spoke in the area? So I decided my first year to work with an organization that brought students over for the summer and do homestays with American families, and worked with the families in my school district. And we brought in a group from France who was there for a month, and it was a spectacular experience for everyone, including me, because I met what became a really good friend of mine. She was a teacher in France, and by the end of the summer, we were great friends, and we decided we were going to do our own student exchange, bringing my students to France, her bringing her students to the U.S., and that's how I got into travel. We started planning these trips every year. And then, one day there was an ad in the paper. I was having my morning coffee. There was an ad in the paper. I mean, no one finds jobs through newspapers anymore, but there was an ad in the local paper, and it said they were looking for someone who was fluent in French, who knew, had an educational background and knew France and knew food and wine. I had gone through college working in fine dining, so I knew food and wine. Plus, I love food and wine. I was a French teacher, and I had been to France multiple times. So out of the blue, I said, you know what, I'm going to apply for this because, teaching's fun, but I want to travel.
Eve, and this was in like the local newspaper in Western Massachusetts?
This was in the local newspaper in Western Massachusetts. And
did you feel like it was written directly to you? Like who else?
Oh, I was like reading it and I'm going like, okay, like did someone like find my profile somewhere and like write this for me? Mm-hmm. So I applied for the position. I got a call like 3 days later, which is probably the time it took my resume to reach the desk of the person. Mm-hmm. Back
when you sent it in the mail, right?
It was all by mail. You didn't email like, so I went for the interview and this is just a funny story, like something you should never do. The guy handed me a sheet of paper to test my language skills. And it was a fax that was written, and for those of you who remember what a fax is, it was a fax written in French. And I had just come from teaching, so I had my bag with me. So I reach into my bag and instinctively grab the red pen and start making corrections on the fax. And then the guy's looking at me, and I realize, I go, oh, I'm terribly sorry. I hope you're not the one who wrote this, but there's like some really glaring spelling mistakes and syntax mistakes.
And he was just wanting a translation, I assume. He wanted to see if you could read it, or
he wanted to see if I could read it and understand it and not correct it. But what he was looking for was someone who was detailed oriented. So after that, he looked at me. He goes, well, this could go either way. I could either give you the job or tell you to leave. He ended up giving me the job.
Was he the one that wrote it?
No, it was written by the person I was replacing. And, and so
was that already predetermined when you said that it was written by the person you were replacing, but did they actually intend for you to replace that person, or
after the intent was I was
the interview with all the red circles on the paper?
Yes. So it was, I mean, it was a fascinating way to start in travel because it was working for a company at the time that was called Elder Hostel. Nowadays it's called Road Scholar, but it was basically educational trips for older Americans. And everything we did was, thinking of travel in the thematic sense, and how do you build a course around a theme in travel? I mean, this was before adventure travel really kind of existed. Like the concept of adventure travel kind of grew out a little bit from educational travel and from people going around like in the 90s. And, adventure travel really comes out as a child of the 90s. And this was like the really early 90s. Mm-hmm. And so my first assignments were building food and wine tours in France.
So did you quit the job teaching?
Yeah, absolutely. Once I found out, build food and wine tours in France, travel for work. And I didn't even really care about what the salary was going to be. Like I was like, all right. Yeah. Okay. When do I start?
Mm-hmm. I've been there, done that. Yep. I get it.
And it proved, to be a wonderful, like I was there for 15 years, and got to travel all over the world. I mean, places that I never thought I would ever visit. I got to explore in depth, parts of the world. And, my specialty really became opening up new destinations and really kind of looking at how do you go into places and build new, and we call it product, but new tours, new experiences, that appeal to the North American market mostly. Mm-hmm. I went to places that you weren't really allowed to travel. Like I spent so much time in Cuba when we opened travel to Cuba. I was there every 2 weeks and have had the opportunity to travel the whole island and drive around the whole island at a time when even my Cuban counterparts hadn't been to parts of Cuba that I had been to. Mm-hmm. And, it's interesting, when you get into this business, and you might know this, you sometimes as a product person have more travel experience in the destination than the partners you're working with in that destination. Mm-hmm. Like I remember, working in France, designing food and wine tours. I knew France better than my friend who was the teacher that I met the first year I started the exchange program. Mm-hmm. She was like, Yves, you know the country better than I do.
Yeah.
And that's really, that's really what brought me to G from Road Scholar.
So what do you think is behind that, other than just the necessity of knowing a country? What do you think that says about maybe your personality or the personality of people that work in adventure, in this, I'm going to say adventure travel, but I mean in this kind of exploratory type of world that we're working in?
I mean, you have to be curious. You have to want to discover and explore and find places that you couldn't find. I mean, nowadays you can do a lot of research online. I mean, when I started, it was guidebooks and in-field research is what you had to do. Like you had to get around. You might be lucky enough, like tourism boards might have half of the accommodations that are available in a destination, half of the things that you can do. But like, if you really want to find a cool restaurant, you got to go from village to village to find the restaurant, meet with the chef. And, and that's really what, you want to replicate in adventure travel. That's what adventure travel is. Like, I look at it, and how we build like new tours today is a little bit how I would build my my exploratory tours when I would go out and do some field research.
Okay. In what way? Help me understand that.
Well, in the way that, when you look at adventure travel, it's about discovering places that aren't necessarily on the beaten path or the absolutely known. Like, you want to go outside of your comfort zone with adventure travel. It's not about just staying in like the one track. And that's what attracted me to adventure travel. Like, I went from educational travel to adventure, and that really was the key. I wanted to really push the envelope a little bit more.
I love that you describe it that way, and listening to you describe it reminds me of how I've described it often, and comfort zone is the number one thing that generally comes up for me as well. Because people ask, well, what is adventure travel? Sometimes when I reach out to people to discuss the podcast, I don't, maybe they say, well, we don't really do adventure travel. Well, hold on, let's discuss this. Because, maybe they're doing, culinary tours, cultural tours. For me, that can be adventure travel if it's outside of your comfort. Some of the best adventures I've had in my travels have been walking down the street somewhere and looking down an alley and seeing a gathering of people and thinking, oh, I'm going to go see what that's all about. So I take a right turn and I walk down, and it's, some street vendors or some little party. I've been invited to birthday parties because of that. Just so I walk up and, I remember in Guatemala once, there was music, and I had to go check it out, and they invited me in, sat me down, fed me a plate full of food and some coffee. And it was a huge adventure. Although I didn't work up any sweat, I didn't, maybe a little bit of adrenaline just because I thought it was cool. But I love that you bring that out, because it's about getting outside the comfort zone. And then the word curiosity is the other thing that you brought up.
Yeah. And you people often think of adventure travel as being like these remote destinations, or the more like obscure, or the more kind of like mythical places. I will say that the greatest growth in adventure travel in terms of numbers of travelers is probably happening in Europe at the moment. And it's this whole concept of, of going beyond just the known cities or the known monuments in Europe. And it's like discovering the parts of Europe that, truly non-adventure companies don't go to. Like, there's a lot of companies that do tours to Europe, a lot of travelers. There's a reason Europe is the number one destination for North Americans in the world. It's beautiful. But we only scratch the surface in Europe. Like I'm currently working on something. We launched a new product line, and I've been working with the team on this new product line, which is all about, looking at popular destinations in a slightly different way, still giving travelers like the experience of the sites you want to go. Like if you go to Portugal, you want to go to Lisbon, you want to go to Porto. But in between there, taking them into a completely different path and making them discover parts of Portugal that really not a lot of travel companies go to. And, and you can only do that like by doing a lot of field research and really doing your research and understanding kind of what it is that the curious traveler wants to see and wants to experience. And people want to feel connected to the places they're traveling, and they want to feel like they're meeting people there that also want to be connected, with them.
Yeah, you said connected to the places, and when you said that immediately, I thought for me it's connecting to the people in those places, and then you mentioned the people in those places connecting as well, because I was discussing this with somebody the other day. As you pick the most beautiful place on the planet, and I go there to see it, and if there's nobody else there, and I'm just there by myself looking at this beautiful scenery, I don't know if it would do it for me. Honestly, I just, drop me in the middle of the Amazon where it's amazing, and I'm just literally by myself. I'm not going to get much out of it. I want to be with the local guide. I want to, meet somebody's kids and see them playing and experience maybe the food and the culture. So
it dropped you in the Amazon in a village where, where you have. And it's more than just dropping you in the Amazon in a village, because you could do that on your own. But it's dropping you in a village in the Amazon with someone who can be there to help facilitate an experience for you that you can understand, but also the person you're interacting with also can understand a little bit better. That creates a deeper connection than if you just dropped yourself there and tried to hand movements and everything. You would still feel that connection. Would you take away as much? No. I mean, with an adventure tour, you'll actually take a lot more, and you'll go, oh my God, this is mind blowing. I actually understood what's going on.
It's that interpretive part, I guess, that really plays in. I remember I was in, where were we? I think we were in Zambia, in Livingston, and went and visited one of the villages there. And the guide that walked us through the village lived there and showed us his house, which was a mud hut. And he was in the process of building one right next to it because his son was turning 8. And at the age of 8, I guess the boys don't live in the mud hut with their mom and their dad anymore. So he was building a mud hut right next to it. And we were, if I just walked through that village, I would have seen some interesting things. But to have him there explaining it, and then as we walked through the village, his little boy, Patrick, I remember Patrick, 7-year-old Patrick, holding my hand as we walked through, the entire walk through the village. He's holding my hand, just grinning ear to ear because he's so proud to be with the tourist and proud that his dad is the village guide, and just the ability to really connect with what was going on there was so much higher than if I had just shown up, on my own and just started walking through the town trying to take pictures. I would have got all those looks like, who are you? What are you doing? So it provided an opportunity for Patrick to connect with me and me to connect with Patrick. And of course, my son is 7 and was back home in the States. So I felt that, so as soon as I go home, I'm showing pictures to my son of Patrick. And for years after Trick is, I'm like, what are you talking about? Patrick, the little boy in Africa that you met.
That's
so
awesome.
That connection went all the way from Patrick there through me back to my son and now I travel with my son and have spent time in, Southeast Asia and Central America with him. And yeah, it's that connection I don't want to travel if I can't connect with people.
Exactly. And I actually think, it goes even more, it gets bigger than just us, just individuals. I think the more we travel and build those connections with people in different cultures and different countries, as a people and as a humankind, we start thinking bigger and more interconnected and less about like our needs, our wants. And it becomes like, how do we, I see it as a force for peace and a force for good the more we travel.
You might have noticed the name of my podcast, and that was where I was going with that whole thing was, okay, it is a big world. I created the podcast when I went to Southeast Asia for the first time, and I always thought of it as being so far away. But once you get on the plane and you go and you start connecting and meeting people, it feels so much closer. So it's kind of, it's a big world. Let's make it a little smaller. And that was kind of the intent of having these conversations with people all over, because you're right. I think it's important that we get to know each other and build these connections, whether it's listening to a podcast of, maybe I'm interviewing somebody that's a guide in New Zealand or Malaysia or whatever, or if we can encourage people to get up, and go visit these places, that's even better. So I get it. And that's my passion in the space. And that's why it's so much fun, talking to people like yourself that live kind of the same mindset. So
the same mindset. Yeah. And I have to say, I haven't met anyone in travel, that's done a lot of travel that doesn't have that same passion or that same drive. And I don't think that's ever gonna go away. And I joke with people, like, my retirement plan is to become a CEO, and a CEO at G, and sorry, I'm using G terminology, but a CEO is what most other companies would call a tour leader. And, my plan for retirement is I'm going to be a CEO and I'm going to go lead tours and take people on.
Is the term like chief experience officer?
That's what it is. Yes.
Yeah. Familiar with that. Yeah. No, I get it completely. I will go find people to guide. I travel full time now. And, if I run into somebody that's kind of looks like they need to go have an adventure, I'm just like, hey, let's go get on the bus. I'm in Colombia. Let's go get on the bus. Let's go get on the metro and just go find something interesting. And it's so much more fun when you can share it with people. And guiding has always been, it's a lot of fun.
It is. I'm curious. And I love guides. Guides, like when you meet them, like, and tour leaders and CEOs, like, they share that same passion. And that's really like, what's important when you look at adventure travel is making sure that, whomever you're traveling with has that passion.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm curious because you've been around, you've been in this space for a while. And I only say that because we were talking about newspapers and faxes earlier. And I'm curious. So if you just look at the general population, and this is not a knock, we all have our own strengths and weaknesses and interests and things. But when you speak about the type of person that makes a good guide, what percentage of the population do you think just has that personality, that curiosity, that passion that could just you could almost pull them out of anything and just drop them in, teach them an area, and they'd be an amazing guide? Because I feel it's pretty rare.
It is. Cause you have to have that passion and it's easy to spot someone who's going to be a good guide. Cause right away, it's someone who's got generally, and who's got the right personality. And, a lot of people would assume, you have to have a bubbly personality. You have to be outspoken. Actually, I found that some of the best guides are not people that are like the first one to talk. They're often the ones who listen the most, because they talk when it's important. And, and I'm not answering your question, but I'm kind of am. I think it's a small percentage of people who can really do a good job at it, because, you know, to be a good guide, a good tour leader, a good CEO, you have to be part teacher. You have to be part entertainer. You have to be part saint. And I say that because you have to be very patient, because you often have to repeat things for travelers. And you have to be like excited when you're sharing knowledge and sharing a destination, and where really what matters the most for you is like when you show someone an experience and you see their face, that's all the reward you need.
Yeah.
You know, cause money aside, all of that's great, but it's not money that makes you a great guide or a great CEO. It's like wanting to let people experience intense feelings when they're traveling.
I love the way you described it. And I think you're right. I think very few guides are drawn in because of money. No. It's generally that personality. I find anyway, that personality is kind of sometimes oblivious, maybe to a fault. I know I'm that way. I've been reminded I've had 2 ex-wives that both remind me, Jason, I know this thing that you're doing is a lot of fun, and wouldn't it be great if, so that's part of it. And I'm curious if your job, if someone hired you, okay, and you have done this, I know is your job is to go out and recruit a bunch of guides for our upcoming season. And you sit down with a strategy. Okay, where am I going to go look for these people? Let's say you can't look at current guides or anybody in the industry, and you've got to just start from scratch and go into a particular industry to try and recruit people to be great guides. Where do you go?
I mean, I would probably start with people that are in education.
I knew you were going to say that. Just like you.
A little bit. Yeah. Or people that are in the restaurant sector, like service sector. Mm-hmm. And the reason I say that is like I said, being a good guide is part being educator and teacher, and part of it is being saint and patient. Mm-hmm. I think teachers have like that patience, and they have that skill to learn. They know how to learn. They know how to teach themselves, and then they know how to share that knowledge for the most part. But I also think people in the service sector, especially, I find waiters especially are good at that kind of stuff, or bartenders tend to be good at that kind of interaction with the public. But you also see it with, some of our greatest CEOs, at have come from our supply chain. They've either been, receptionists at the hotel, or, a waiter at one of the restaurants we've worked at, or the driver's assistant on the bus. And they just say, I want to be like him or her. And they get inspired by, some of our CEOs, and our CEOs take them under their wing. And, in a lot of countries, becoming a tour guide or a CEO or tour leader is actually access to the middle class. Mm-hmm. So when we talk about like the good travel can do, that is one of the realities of travel in many places. Travel here in the US, working in travel, or, in Europe is kind of not, it's not seen as a high paying kind of profession. But when you go into like India, Africa, Asia, being a tour guide or being a guide is actually access to the middle class for many people. And, our CEOs will often take young people who express interest under their wing and kind of teach them a little bit and push them. And, I love seeing that. And again, that's something that creates a connection, because they'll often show their group that, or introduce them to this young person. And it just encourages them to pursue and grow themselves. So, it's infinite, the good you can do with travel.
No, it's very cool. I've seen that. I worked in the fly fishing industry for years, and virtually all of it was international stuff. And I would go somewhere and spend all day with a guide, and you really kind of get to learn about their family and the dynamics of the area. And you sometimes when you get back to the dock, just the way the people interact with them on the dock, or their children come out and excited to see them, or just you can just really sense that there's a great sense of pride. The ones that are good, and there's very many great ones. Just the sense of pride that they have and the respect that they have in the community. And maybe sometimes, I've seen them after hours too, walking around in the town or the village, and they look like leaders, in their communities. And without that type of work, you got to wonder, what does that look like? Because I don't want to say anything disparaging, but sometimes they look like leaders in the sense that they could also be a negative leader, in their community. They're walking around. They've got a little bit more financial resources, a little bit more of a swagger. They kind of hold their head high. And in some communities, especially impoverished communities, that person that looks like that may be doing something totally different to generate their income and respect. And I think it's just great to see, hey, this guy's out there, making this living and creating this for himself and his family as a fishing guide or as a tour guide of some sort, as opposed to just the badass on the block that, is, running some other businesses on the side that are not so great for the community.
Yeah, I find that people like that, though, in travel, they come through very quickly, and they tend to not stick around for a long time, or they're like not allowed to stick around for a long time, or their influence diminishes very quickly. Like once you start getting into that bad apple place, like I've seen the bad side of travel, trust me. But when we're talking about adventure travel, I find that kind of personality doesn't stick around for a long time.
Okay, I got what you're saying, and I'm wondering if maybe I didn't explain very well.
Okay, so maybe, yeah.
Sorry. Well, what I'm thinking is not that I'm a badass because I'm a guide. It's I'm proud of what I'm doing. I'm doing something great. I'm helping people experience amazing things. My community sees that. My community values that. My family values that, as opposed to somebody else in the community that maybe has similar financial resources.
Okay.
However, achieve those financial resources by, doing other things that are not so supportive of the community and that type of thing. So I guess that's where I was going with that. And that's a pleasure to see that, because without tourism, you got to wonder, okay, well, what's this guy going to do?
Exactly.
So exactly. I agree that I think tourism provides a lot of opportunity.
Yeah, it's just I have seen people in tourism that are not necessarily don't really think bigger picture, bigger like the good of the community.
I've seen that too.
And I find they don't it's one of those industries where people like that don't stick around very long in any one place. I mean, they may stay in the industry, but they're not super successful, or they're not they don't stay with the same company or in the same path for very long, because people catch on very quickly. And we're a small community in travel. Like the one thing no one ever talks about, but it's amazing how small the travel community is when you think about how big the world is.
Yeah. No, I get it. It's so interesting. Sometimes I have conversations with people and we dig a little deeper and find out it's at 7 degrees of separation, but I think in tourism it's like 2 degrees.
Oh, I was going to say it's probably 2 degrees.
I'm not planning to go here on this conversation, but Yves, I've never met you in person. I don't really know too many people at G Adventures, and I'm pretty sure that if we started comparing notes, I probably have a ton of people that I've worked closely with, that you've worked closely with, and it's just always so interesting. And it's definitely come up as I've been working on this podcast. You know, we're recording this in January 2024. Podcast's only been around a few months. I've interviewed about 50 people now. And I'm to the point now where I send out an invite to somebody that I'm excited about chatting with, and they come back and say, "Oh yeah, you interviewed so-and-so and so-and-so and so-and-so, and those are my friends." And absolutely, yeah, let's connect. And it's all just becoming this big word of mouth community, and it's been a lot of fun. So I get that. So what's your best advice to somebody? Maybe there's somebody out there listening to this that is a school teacher, or, you know, is working in a restaurant or a hotel, and their dream is to go be a guide for G Adventures. What's your best advice for them?
Apply.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good start.
I mean, it's like, you know, I think, you know, people often think, well, I'm not qualified, I can't do it. You know, there are always introductory roles available, or first year. There's always a first year tour leader, CEO. It's really the most important thing I would say is do your research and make sure you go work with a company that shares your value, but also that what they're looking to deliver works with who you are and your personality. Because, you know, there's companies out there that really want tour leaders that are more, you know, academic. They'll want someone who talks to the client more from a, you know, academic perspective, learning perspective. Then there are companies who want you to talk much more from a local knowledge perspective. So they'll hire you, but in an area where you're really knowledgeable. Mm-hmm. And then there's companies who are looking more for people who can facilitate the group dynamic and create a group dynamic that's really tight, because part of the experience about that people are looking for when they travel on a group trip is that connection with other travelers. And, you know, I find that when you have a CEO that can build that connection on tour, the experience the group has with the activities we've set up or the interactions we've set up is that much better, because there is that bond that's formed between the travelers, and they want to have a shared experience all of a sudden. Instead of going back to you alone in the Amazon. Imagine if you were in the Amazon with a bunch of friends visiting that village. Yeah. That experience becomes even more intense and even more touching to you, and more meaningful.
No, I agree. And when you were saying that, I was imagining kind of a scenario where if you've got a great trip leader, tour manager, whatever you want to call it, CEO, that's able to bring the group together. I can imagine scenarios where if you've got a really cohesive group, that everybody feels involved, everybody feels connected and respected, and all those things that go along with that, they may actually have, this is hard for me to put in words, but you might be able to take them somewhere that's maybe even not that exciting or that interesting, and they'll still have a really good experience. Whereas if you take a group of people to some place that's mind-blowing, but you don't have that cohesion, you're not feeling that shared experience, you've got 3 or 4 people in the group that feel like, oh, nobody likes me, nobody wants to talk to me, I kind of feel left out here, then I would rather have the lesser experience, maybe the destination that's not as exciting with a really cohesive group, than a really exciting destination with a group that's just totally disconnected and discombobulated. What do you think?
I mean, I think every destination is exciting, by the way, because I think it really
I kind of do too. I was just trying to make a point. So I don't know, like if I had to give you examples, I don't know what they'd be, because I can pretty much have fun anywhere as long as I'm connecting with people.
Exactly. That's where I was going to go with this. I think, you know, and I don't want to use any destination as an example, because I'll get a call from a tourism board that'll say, "How could you?" But it doesn't matter where you are in the world. Is if you as a, like me, basically as a product person in my team, have built something that's solid, that's built on creating experiences, creating connection, and you have a CEO that is on top of that, that knows how to connect the group, understands what the experience needs to feel like to people, understands the community, and you have a community that is embracing receiving travelers, it's going to be a phenomenal experience for travelers.
Right.
No matter where you are.
And I also hear you saying in that, if maybe you and your team put together an amazing product because there's an interesting mix of experiences and opportunities, that trip leader can be the icing on the cake, or can really also kind of just diminish it.
Can diminish it, yes.
So it's kind of like you got the foundation, and then it's the trip leader's ability to create an experience, to turn that experience into a shared experience of some sort, or the connection. I think that's
yeah. I mean, tour leaders are a little bit like, they're a little bit artistes, you could say. Because we can give them like the best itinerary, but if they don't really deliver it'll still be a good travel experience. It just may not be like that phenomenal, connection that you feel.
And it can be as simple as not being able to remember people's names. Right? I mean, just something that simple. If you're leading a group, you've got a group of 12 or 24 people, and everything else is great, but you just cannot remember people's names, and you just, someone walks up to you, hey Bob, how's it going? Are you having fun? They're like, no, my name's Phil. That that connection could go really, really quick.
Yeah, or not
there's
waiting,
a lot of different things.
Not waiting for people who you're walking through a town, and you stop somewhere to explain what's in this pastry shop's window, and you didn't wait for the last 5 people, and they go, why did we stop here?
And it's always probably going to be the last 5 people. So after a week of that, those 5 had a totally different experience than the 5 that are the quickest walkers.
Yeah. And, and it's like a really good guide will sometimes not lead the group, but back up the group, push the group. I might say.
Well, and I've seen, in some tour situations where they've got a team, 2 really, really good people. You've got the one at the front, and then you always have the one at the back to make sure that everybody's kind of feeling involved and kind of move things along. And but that's not always feasible. I get that, and I can see why when it is feasible that people do that.
And I mean, ultimately, it comes down to also you as the traveler knowing what it is that you need as a person and as a personality, because adventure travel's really broad. Let's be honest. There are adventure travel companies where you stay in, homestays, and and a homestay might be just a bunk bed in the corner of the room with the family. And then you have adventure travel companies where you stay in 5-star tented camps with bathtubs that can fit 6 people in the middle of the room, in a bed that's the size of a size of a boat. And they're both adventure travel. It's really, you have companies where the adventure, is a little lighter. It's more about, seeing than doing. And you have some companies that are more about doing and seeing. So it's really, as a traveler, it's understanding where you fit with a company, which company fits you, or which company do you fit, or which travel style do you fit? Because that will help you have a better experience. Sometimes people, are driven by by price when they're shopping. And I'm taking us in a different direction here, Jason.
No, I love it. I love where we're going with
because
this.
I think travelers like need to know that there is a difference between companies, and they need to find a company that really matches what they're looking for in their travel experience. And, you know, and there are multiple ways to do that. You know, start by researching the company, start by looking, but don't always shop by price. I think that's a mistake people often make, is like, oh, this is a great deal, I'm going to have a great experience. Well, you're traveling with a company that doesn't have a tour leader, that doesn't have included activities. I mean, it's a hotel, it's a breakfast, and it's transfers between sites. The rest is up to you to build. It was a great price, but okay, like, are you prepared? Have you built anything ahead of time? Like, I see travelers come back. People tell me all the time, oh, I went there, but you know, there was nothing planned.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, but that's what you bought. Like, it's understanding who you're working with. And I think that's an important piece.
I think that's super important. And one example that comes to mind when you speak about the range is just like, if you decide, okay, I want to go to Africa, and a friend says you should go to Tanzania. Okay, great. And I start, if all I have in my mind is I want to go to Tanzania and I've got X budget that I'm working with and I want to spend as little as possible, and you find yourself on a camping trek up Mount Kilimanjaro as opposed to, game viewing safari and luxury camps. It's important to kind of know what really are you looking for? Because otherwise, yeah, you can just go and you come back and say, well, yeah, I went to Africa. It was horrible. I spent, 7 days climbing up this mountain, sleeping in a tent and eating ramen noodles. And I would never recommend that. So it is important to not just think Africa, price point, go online, Google trip to Africa, because there's so many different options. And I want to ask you though directly, when you say, make sure you're aligning with a company that kind of, because you mentioned that both for somebody looking to get into the business and also, a potential client looking to take some trips. I think we don't need to touch too much on the person looking to get in the business, but I'm curious, how do you describe your typical, I guess, the avatar, the person that is generally the best fit with G? And I know there's some flexibility, and maybe you've got 2 or 3 different avatars based on your different products, but I figure you're probably the person to ask. So if somebody's listening to this right now, maybe they can see themselves.
So whether you're looking to get into the business as a tour guide or as a client, you look at a company like G, and this is what attracted me to G, is as a company, very much the goal and the essence of the company is that travel is a force for good. When done right, it's a force for good. And I think that's what most people who work in travel really feel like. They want that, and they see that, and they understand that from having traveled. At G, we take that to the next level. And that's what attracted me. But when you look at avatars, we have multiple travel styles. You can go on an escorted backpacker trip that's much more targeted for youth, where you stay, you might do more homestays, hostel stays, and more budget hotels where you take overnight trains and potentially overnight buses. But, your dinner will be, street food in Hanoi, led by a tour leader, where you're going to have the best ramen noodle you've ever had. But, and that's the kind of experience much more targeted for someone where comfort is not as important as safety and experience and getting out in the world and being on a budget, because those tend to be a budget tours.
I want to ask, before we move on past that one, you mentioned typically attractive to, I'm thinking like the backpackers, the younger backpackers. I've been traveling full time for 2 years. I stay in hostels, and everything you just described is like, yeah, that's me. And I'm 50. Yeah. So I'm curious, anybody that's listening to this that's a little older that maybe feels inspired the same way I just did when I heard you say that. Do you feel like typically those groups are open to the older folks as long as they kind of understand that this is a backpacker trip?
Yeah, generally, and there are travel styles more targeted towards that. Like we our youth product is actually, we kind of have an age limit, like over 40,
Okay.
like it's 18 to 40 to travel on that. And part of it is like, it really is, about, the connection that happens
The group
between
dynamics.
the youth and the group
I
dynamic.
get it.
You look at
I see that as well.
yeah, you look at our classic travel style where we use homestays, we use all kinds of accommodations. And that has a much broader age range, and it's still, everything about meeting the communities, about connecting with the communities. It's still the ramen noodle in Hanoi, it's the street food in Amman. It's like, it's just done with a little bit more, comfort and a bit more understanding that you're dealing with a traveler who might want a little bit more comfort, like, and a little bit more, sense of like a overnight bus ride, probably not the thing they want to do. But they might do an overnight train,
Right.
And that's what we look at. And then, we have our National Geographic partnership, which is much more for someone who's looking for a travel experience that's a little bit more cerebral in nature and kind of touches on some iconic places and iconic experiences, but from like the National Geographic Society perspective. So understanding the history behind it, the culture behind it. It's a little bit more cerebral in nature.
Isn't that what's great about branding is you just have to say a National Geographic partnership, National Geographic type of trip. And so many people.
And so many people
listening to
understanding
this.
exactly.
Oh, yeah, there's going to be somebody with a PhD probably that's going to probably be super excited about, marine crustaceans or something like that. And I love that. I think that's cool as well. So,
no. And you're right. There's going to be people, really smart people on these tours that are going to connect with you. But, we also, and again, because of who we are as a company, we take that whole concept of doing good and connecting to a slightly higher level, even with Nat Geo. So it's like, so you might still have the ramen noodles and the street food tour, but you're going to have it at a slightly different level. So maybe instead of like the lady who has the cart on the side of the road, it'll be like the best little ramen noodle shop in Hanoi that we're going to take you to, where tourists don't generally go, but we know it's good, it's safe, and you're going to have an awesome ramen experience. So
I love that we're talking about ramen.
I know.
That is, to me, that's adventure. I'm in Colombia, and I was at the market the other day, just at the grocery store buying some stuff, and I saw ramen noodles, and I haven't eaten ramen, like I haven't made ramen noodles for myself in a long time, since probably college. And I saw ramen noodles in the store, and I actually bought 2 little bags of the ramen noodles and brought them back to my little guest house I'm staying in and made ramen noodles, which felt weird, but it was kind of an adventure in its own right, I guess. I don't know.
And there's probably going to be someone in this podcast going, Yves, my God, you're in Hanoi. It's not ramen noodle. It's pho.
Yeah.
So let me stand and correct myself. Pho.
That was good. Maybe should I go back and edit out every repetition of the ramen? But yeah, you're right. But I get it. We know what you're talking about. So, all right. It's very cool. I want to ask you this now because I want to make sure I don't forget. Where did the name G Adventures come from? What's the story there? What?
So it predates me. So I know it because I've read Bruce's book, a couple times actually. And, so G Adventures actually had a previous name, and it was, Gap Adventures. So Great Adventure People. And it was a play on the concept of a gap year. And that's where it comes from. And, today we dropped the gap and just made it G Adventures.
Well, that makes sense. And I think it was the conversation of the backpackers, the ramen or the pho, and that made me remember. Oh yeah, I do recall that it was Gap Adventures. So okay, all right.
Yeah, it was, right, and it's funny because I mean the brand is really well known. It's known in parts of the world. I was in Bolivia, so I went about 4 years ago. Yeah, right before the pandemic. I went to Bolivia. And I wanted to go see, because people were telling me this was impossible to do at a more comfortable level, to do the desert crossing between the salt flats and Chile, to do it at a slightly higher level that was a little bit more comfortable. And I said, well, I don't believe that it's impossible, because every time I've been told something's not possible, I go and I find a way to do it. So I said to the team, I said, I'm going. And so we went, and when we got to the border in Chile, I mean, this is a border in the middle of the desert, by the way. There's like nothing around it except like you drive through this garage, like it's this metal building. The garage door opens, the car goes on one side, you're in Bolivia. On the other side, you're in Chile.
Okay. And
you put your luggage on like a, kind of like an airport carpet, and they check your luggage. It was quite an interesting experience. But you come out of the garage, the door opens, and that's where there was someone there with a Mr. Marceau Gap Adventures. And we hadn't been Gap Adventures for 5 or 6 years by that time. But it was like, that's how deep of a connection the brands sometimes have in destinations. Like, people know you, like, and they know who you are, and companies that make an impact are known locally. And it's important to, I go back to, it's important to travel with the right company for you as an individual, and to do your research, and because you will have a better experience. I think for most travelers, there is a travel style at G for them. But some people may want something that's not as adventuresome, not as, not as organized sometimes, or even a little less organized. So it may not be the trip for them, but research the trip, make sure you ask questions. Okay. And those are the important things as a traveler.
Great advice. And was there any other, levels or different types of, we spoke about National Geographic. Was there, because you guys have another one that I was reading about.
We just, launched a new one. Yes.
Yeah. So tell us about that.
I'm very excited about this one. And this is the one I was telling you about. I think I alluded to research earlier. So it's called Gelux, and it is a upgraded, more active travel style. And it's taking everything we do at G and taking it to 11. So we've taken the accommodations to 11. So they're really purposeful, comfortable. And I don't want to use the word luxury, because we really don't want to use luxury, even though the name is Gelux. It's more a play on deluxe, like having the deluxe burger versus the regular burger. Yep. It's having more of the good thing. So the accommodations are all really curated properly, like they're comfortable. We have on every tour, like what we call an OMG stay, because once you get there and have the experience, because it's more than just about the accommodation, it's about the whole experience around where you're staying. You're going to be, oh my God, I can't believe we did that.
So as a product person, do you plan that? Where do you plan that? Like in the course? Because I think sometimes trips can be like a story, right? They kind of build, and then they've got the climax and then the fun memories. So where do you put that OMG stay in your typical product mix? I'm just curious.
So it depends on the destination. Like we haven't really said it's got to be there. The whole point of the OMG stay is we're going to take you somewhere in the trip where not a lot of people go, or it's not well known. And we're going to find an accommodation that's really super cool. It's always going to be comfortable, but it's also going to be super cool. And what we can do around there, or what we can do at the accommodation, is going to be a really unique community connection. It's really going to blow your mind.
Yeah, I'm excited to learn more. I need to get on the team with you.
So we launched
developing some of this stuff. It sounds like a lot of fun.
Yeah, so we launched the first batch of trips in November, and we are wrapping up the second batch of trips that are going to go live at the beginning of March.
Now, are these all group trips, or
They're all small group trips? Yeah.
Okay. Is a group trip with G Adventures a good place to meet a partner? Somebody's like, I'm single, I love to travel. I would love to meet somebody that likes to travel, because I'm a firm believer that if you want to meet somebody that likes to do something, you should go where those people are doing things. What do you think?
Interesting. You should bring that up. I actually was talking to a reporter from The Guardian this morning in the UK, who's doing an article about solo traveling. Mm-hmm. It is. I mean, again, you have to pick the right company, because a lot of companies, like, they attract much more couples. At G, about 50 to 60% of our travelers are solo. Now, solo doesn't always mean single. So I some people are traveling alone because their partner doesn't like to go do this activity.
Doesn't mean that everybody that's there by themselves is fair game, and you should be working your charms.
But we hear a lot of stories of people who've connected on tours and, have become lifelong friends. Yes, we do have a number of people who've met on tours, and they've done their honeymoon on a tour. Later on.
That's cool. Yeah.
Those are always cool stories. And when I read them, it just warms my heart. Because, they found each other like at a time where they were both like having a good time. And then they're doing their honeymoon on one of our tours. Like, that always like makes me smile.
That's very cool. Do you think that there's do your trip planners, or whatever you call the people that are taking the calls and helping people choose trips? If I were to ask one of them, do you have like certain trips that are just like best for single people that are looking to create relationships? Would they have some go-to, like, oh yeah, this is the best trip for that, or is it not like that?
I think they would, like, depending on who you're talking to, they might know, because they've been on so many of our trips. But you've just given me a great idea.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. What are we going to call it?
I don't know, but not so much.
Do you want to announce it right now on the podcast?
No, it's more something for our staff, if they do get that question, that we could give them tours where we see a lot more solo travelers. Like,
yeah, because I think that would
tend to attract more solo travelers.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting to know. And sometimes some settings are just more inclined to create those types of connections too. I would imagine. I don't know. I'm not in the dating.
I mean, you definitely see more solo travelers on our 18 to 30s and our Romies trip, but those tend to be younger travelers anyway, so they're probably not married yet.
And they'll find people along the way anyway. I think it's that divorcee, that woman or man that was married for 20 years, their partner didn't like to travel. They kind of towed the line, and now they're 40, 50, 60 or more. And they're like, I want to go travel, but they didn't travel for 20, 30 years. So they don't have a network of friends and people that like to travel. And wouldn't it be great to find a partner that was in the same situation that, because there's a lot of Facebook groups, find a travel buddy type of thing.
Things I can say is that it doesn't matter the trip you go on. The nice thing with, I can't speak to other companies because I don't get to see their demographics like I do ours. But doesn't matter which trip you go on. Our trips tend to attract, a good number of solo travelers. So even if you're not looking for a spouse or someone, and you're a solo traveler who just wants to travel, and because ultimately you always find your spouse and the love of your life when you're not looking.
Yeah.
So that's my advice. It is, that you'll be able to connect with people who want to. And, at G, we offer solo travelers the ability to do a match, so they don't have to pay for a single supplement.
Nice.
So if you're
is that
traveling
as
solo,
long as they're willing to share
with someone
with
of the same gender,
same sex, okay, same gender, yep, okay.
And if we can't match them, we'll give them a free single room.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Like if we don't have someone to match them with, they'll get a single room for the trip.
That's a huge thing that anybody that's listening to this that hasn't tried to travel solo before or hasn't priced out trips. The single supplement is something that can really make a difference for a lot of people. And so, listen up closely.
Yeah. And people don't often think of the single supplement because they say, well, why should I pay more for the room? But you're not paying more for the room. You're paying more because you're alone in the room. Like when we do the price of a package, yeah. When we do the cost of a trip, we assume the room half, 2 people. So.
And an organization like you'd mentioned, you have, I think you said 50-60% of your travelers are solos. So when your audience or when your clientele travels that way, you can say, okay, there's probably a high likelihood that we can pair people up. So it makes sense for you to take a little bit of financial risk there to kind of make that promise that as long as you're willing to share, then you don't have to pay for the single supplement. Where if you're a single traveler and you are considering a company that does lots of couples and families and all that type of thing, the chances of you finding an arrangement like that is much lower. And it's
a lot of companies, if you're traveling solo, you have to pay for a single right up front.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So that's I goes back to like researching the companies and seeing. Yeah.
All right. So, very cool. We've discussed so many things. I can't wait to see what you create with the team here in the future. Look forward to maybe having some opportunities to collaborate as well. And I'm curious, Yves, what did I forget to ask you, or what should I have asked you that you think our listeners really need to hear before we wrap it up?
Well, the one question that everyone always asks me is what's my favorite place that I
wasn't going to ask that.
And I'm actually glad you didn't ask that, because that is the hardest answer in the world. And as someone who's traveled, you probably totally understand what I'm saying.
There's a reason I don't ask that, but go ahead. I'm curious I'm happy you brought it up.
I mean, there isn't a favorite place that I traveled. There's favorite experiences that I've had. And I think it comes down to traveling being about experiences and, and experiences that sometimes make you cry, experiences that make you laugh, experiences that, just make you enjoy the world. Like, so I think one of my favorite experiences, I have to say, was probably in Africa, where, we were driving in the Serengeti, and we were kind of rushing to go from one camp to another. And I was doing an inspection. And so we weren't really doing wildlife viewing, but we were the only vehicle in this entire area. And we drove by this bunch of trees, and the driver stopped, and there was an entire pride of lions, like right there. And we spent half an hour stopped, and I just told the guy, I said, let's just stop and enjoy this and listen to the pride of lions. Like literally they were like 10 feet from me. Mm-hmm. And I'm sitting in this vehicle with the guide, and we're talking, and we're having this conversation about preservation in Africa with this pride of lions that's right there in front of us with all these cubs. Mm-hmm. And I felt so blessed and privileged to be there and see this. And I was thinking, like, here I am, a little guy from Montreal, Canada, like grew up, like I'm here in Africa, and I'm like watching this pride of lion. How lucky am I?
Yeah. What a great story.
That's like the things you have to remember when you travel, when you have these experiences, like how lucky, how privileged we are to be able to have these experiences.
Not everybody is able to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that when we are able to do that, we almost owe it to ourselves and the people that we connect with when we travel to go do it.
Yeah.
And thank you. I'm happy. That's a great place to wrap it up.
Thanks,
Yves.
Jason, it was a pleasure talking with you. And
thank you so much.
I hope everyone enjoys these stories we shared.
I trust that they will, and that's my purpose. And I can't do it without folks like yourself. So, Yves, thank you very much for taking time out of your day to come share some stories and some insights and just help our listeners kind of make the big world a little smaller.
Excellent. Well, I'm there.
All right.
Thanks.
We'll talk to you real soon. Thanks, Yves.
Bye.
I trust you enjoyed listening to the conversation as much as I enjoyed recording it. If you're enjoying the Big World Made Small podcast, please take a moment to tell the algorithm by subscribing and posting a review so that others can benefit as well. I also invite you to take a quick trip over to bigworldmadesmall.com and join our private adventure travel community to receive new episode notifications, special access to our guest experts, and perhaps even some exclusive partner offers that we haven't discussed on the podcast. I'll publish another episode soon. Until then, keep exploring. It's the best way to make a big world feel just a bit smaller.